JETC out of 716. So I had to go extra long to get all my hours in to get out of JETC. The city of Houston back then.
Yeah, when you finish.
We ready to go, I guess. Good, Tamla?
Yeah, cool,
Okay.
of course with that.
It's 9:03 a.m. I'd like to call this meeting of the Texas Department of License and Regulation, Electrical Safety and License Advisory Board meeting to order. Item B is a roll call and certification for quorum. The meeting has been posted in a manner as prescribed by law. When I do the roll call, I'm going to do something a little different. We got some new members, and if when I call your name, if you'll introduce yourself and what you do, that'd give us kind of an idea, give a chance to kind of meet and greet. So with that said, I'm Keith Bell, presiding officer. I'm the owner of Intex Electrical Contractors in Dallas, Texas. Mr. Brad Boyer.
Present. Also, I'm an electrical engineer and a master electrician. Own two businesses in Houston, Lone Star Pre-Stress and an engineering firm, Collaborative. Been on the board as long as Keith here, almost 10 years.
Michael Vermillion.
Present. I'm Vice President of ISC Constructors, LLC, an industrial electrical and instrumentation contractor in Houston, Texas.
Michael Northcutt.
I've been on the board, I guess, probably 5 years. I'm a retired state employee, worked for the state for 38 years, and right now golf is probably my specialty.
Mr. Stephen Palmacaw.
Present. I'm the owner of Randall Electric Company here in Austin, Texas. I also serve on the City of Austin Electrical Board.
Mr. Mark Roach. Mr. John Sparrow.
Present. I am a principal of Cadence Development, builder developer here in Austin, Texas.
Mr. Gary Strauss.
I'm present, and I'm the training director in Houston for the Joint Apprenticeship Training Committee, NECA and IBEW.
And Mr. Chris Wagner. All right. Let the record reflect we do have a quorum present, and it is the 6th day of October, 2015. Welcome, everyone. Hope you find our meeting today insightful. Thanks for members for being here today. Moving on to item C is approval of our minutes from our December the 4th, 2014 meeting. If there are no corrections, I would move for a motion to accept those minutes.
So moved.
I have a motion to accept the minutes. Is there a second?
Second.
Have a second. Got a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, call for the vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to item D is we're going to have a TDLR video presentation on the public comment process. So I guess at this time I'll turn that over
to Mr. Chris Russey.
All right, Mr. Chris, I guess IT, if you'll show us our video here, that'll be good.
My name is Mary Winston. Today we're going to explain the public comment process for commission meetings.
And I'm Ken Sharp. We'll also explain the rules that you and the commission must follow during this process.
Members of the public may come to commission meetings to voice their opinions about matters under the commission's authority. This is the public comment part of the meeting. This is an opportunity for members of the public to have their voice heard regarding a subject that is not included on the meeting's agenda.
Now, as you might imagine, it would get confusing if everyone talked and the commission didn't know who they were or why they were there. The commission has a few rules to help make this an orderly process and give everyone who wants to make a public comment a chance to speak.
To make a public comment, you must first complete a public comment form. You'll find these forms on the table by the door when you first walk into the commission meeting room. Fill out the form completely, and when you finish, give it to the commission's administrative assistant so she can add your name to the list of speakers for the public comment part of the meeting.
The second rule is that you must limit your comments to 3 minutes or less. 3 minutes can be a very long time if you're nervous.
Yes, it can, but it goes by quickly. That's why it's very important to plan your comments carefully so you can make your point in the short amount of time available to you.
An important thing to remember is that you may not comment on any case the commission must decide during the meeting.
That's exactly right. The commission does not want to ignore you or your opinions, but because of the pending case, the commissioners might have to interrupt you and stop you from making those comments. That could be embarrassing, but more importantly, you will have wasted your time. The public comment portion of the agenda is for the commission to hear what the public has to say about issues that are not specifically listed on the agenda. The public comment period does not include debate about the issues. If the topic you want to talk about is already on the agenda, then you have to wait until the commission gets to that agenda item. You won't be allowed to comment on that topic during the public comment part of the meeting. Public comments are only for topics that are not on the agenda.
If you have a case pending before the commission, you'll get an opportunity to talk to the commission about your case when it comes up on the agenda. For that reason, you will not be allowed to talk to the commission about your case in the public comment part of the meeting. The commission will hear your case when it has to decide your case and when the commissioners have your case filed in front of them.
So those are the basic rules about making public comments at a commission meeting. You must fill out a public comment form.
You only have 3 minutes to make all of your comments.
You may not comment on any case the commission has to decide that day.
Any comments about a topic that is listed on the agenda must wait until the commission takes up that agenda item.
If you have a case pending before the commission, comments about your own case will have to wait until the commission actually considers your case.
Excuse me.
TDLR commissioners are good listeners and will consider everything you say, but keep in mind that they are not allowed to respond to your public comments. That's because the commission is only allowed to talk about things that are on the agenda. That way everyone, commissioners and the public alike, will know how to plan for each meeting.
We hope you find this information useful as you plan to make a public comment at the meeting of the Texas Commission of Licensing and Regulation.
And remember, if you ever have any questions, you can always call TDLR for assistance. While the staff at TDLR cannot give you any legal advice, they can answer basic questions about procedures at commission meetings, like offering public comments.
Thank you for watching.
All right, Chris. Thank you for that information. Any questions by the board members as far as concerning the public comment process? If you have any, you can address those to Mr. Francis today.
Well, we actually have one of the stars,
Okay, and
Mary Winston here, so
Ms. Winston.
you know, we'll make her available for autographs or questions.
Any questions? All right, thank you for that presentation. Moving on to item E, it's my understanding, though we've been trained in the process, we have no one wishing to speak to us today. So, is that correct, Ms. Fletcher?
There are no comments.
Okay. All right. Also, at this time, before we go into staff reports, I'd like the record to reflect, Mr. Roach is with us, so I have amended our roll call to reflect such. So, moving on to item F, staff reports. Item 1 is from the executive office. This time, the chair would recognize Mr. Brian Francis.
Mr. Chairman, board members, I'm Brian Francis, Deputy Executive Director with TDLR. First of all, I'd like to thank you guys, as always, for volunteering your time to participate in this. It's important to have your voice, and particularly the issues today that we'll have on the agenda dealing with the penalty matrix. I mean, that's where the rubber meets the road. You guys are going to be deciding or helping us decide the framework on when folks will be penalized and when they will not. And that's an important part of the job, so thank you guys for being here. The legislative session was extremely busy. You can imagine going into a new football game and realizing that you know nothing about the opponents. Absolutely nothing. You've got a brand new governor, you have a brand new lieutenant governor, You have a changeover in the Senate. You have a lot of new faces, and you have to get in there and try to figure things out, reestablish the credibility, the lines of communication. So we were extremely busy. We had a great team helping us with our legislative matters. We tracked more bills than we've ever tracked before. We attended and testified at more hearings than we've ever attended and testified at before. It was extremely humbling at some times. You had to introduce yourself and TDL who, TDL what, that sort of thing. But we were fortunate. Bill drives a great ship. He has a lot of respect over at the Pink Building, and so we're able to make some of those crossroads. We would deem it a successful session. I think the legislature deemed it one for us as well. They transferred 8 new programs to TDLR. So beginning on September 1, we took over the administration and regulation of the driver's training program, and we actually brought together the parent-taught portion and the traditional driver education portion of it, as well as driver safety. That's a big deal. March 1 of 2016, we are targeted for taking over 7 programs at the Department of State Health Services. So we have been busy since June 22nd or so, putting in the infrastructure, trying to figure out how we're going to bring those things on with the technology. We anticipate that at the October 14th meeting, 7 new advisory boards will be appointed. We anticipate at that meeting that there will be appointments to this advisory board as well. The reason why I say anticipate, because it's my boss's call, and it's really hard to speak for the person who's in charge of the person who's in charge of your person. But we anticipate that those things will take place. They are on the agenda. I would encourage everyone to follow that. We will send out notices accordingly on our listserv message to make sure that everyone gets the word on whatever is decided or whatever comes out of those discussions. As a result of the new responsibilities, TDLR was authorized to hire some new folks. We have been hiring up for the driver's training program. We won't start hiring up for the Department of State Health Services program maybe until January or February as we get the infrastructure built. But nonetheless, we had to do some reorganization in our agency. We went from having 18 advisory boards, and now we'll be at 26. We'll be at 26 advisory boards. It is the new business. Imagine duplicating you guys over and over. Not that you're bad people, but there's a lot of you. And so with that in mind, we had to do some moving around and adding some resources. Tamala Fletcher, Delia, who's in the office, and Mary Winston, we've brought them on board to be the advisory board support and counsel and to help us make sure that we provide the level of service that you guys need to make sure that the agendas are done right and the materials out there to you timely, that this room is set up, that all those little things that go with managing what was before 159 advisory board members, and now that number has ballooned. Recently, we've gone through the process of evaluating applicants for the new advisory boards, and one of them alone had 150 plus applicants wanting to get on the seats. The way I look at it is that there were about 8 seats that we could fill, so we're looking at about 142 people who won't be happy with us. So we anticipate that they'll be calling, but that's part of the process. We've had some other changes in our agency in terms of having our IT division merge together to really help us focus on some of the external threats that happen to an agency as well as just a regular business. The security stuff is real. I mean, people, our friends in the Ukraine have the most aggressive approach of trying to do penetration of websites. So they've been known to send over 20,000 to 40,000 hits within an hour on your webpage trying to just see if they can get in, can I get in, can I get in? And so we're trying to beef up our resources in that regard. The driver's training and our examination education group, Ray will touch on that a little bit. We've beefed up his resources. We've split out some of our inspection function. You guys are not impacted by that directly, but there are schools that typically get inspected in cosmetology, barber, and now in driver education safety. Well, those inspections were housed under our field operations group. We now have all the education-related matters under Ray and his team. So just changes like that, trying to get familiar with the new person sitting across from you in the cube. We built out the space across the hallway in anticipation of the new employees coming on board. So there's a lot of movement, a lot of new parts. I have a saying that particularly with the changes in the political environment and such, that TDLR is fortunate, that people look to us as a solution and not a problem, and that, when our employees start getting a little stressed about all the responsibilities that may be coming our way, I always tell them, hey, it's good to be at the table than on the plate. And so we're sitting at the table, and we're holding some silverware in our hands, so we're feeling really good about that. So we talked about legislative update, organization, and recent developments. I'm available to answer any questions if you have any.
Any questions by the board for our executive office?
And I just had to say, Bill is on vacation. He is doing his annual hunting thing, and we always like to, he's going to shoot something in October. And we just like him to be somewhere else when he's shooting it. So we send him out of town with that itchy trigger finger.
Oh, well, that's great. Any questions for Mr. Francis? All right, thank you, Mr. Francis. Appreciate your report. Moving on to Compliance Division, F2. This time, the chair recognizes Mr. Jerry Daniels.
Jerry Daniels, State of Texas, Department of License and Regulations, Electrical Occupation Code Specialist. If you turn over to our Compliance Division staff report, you can see the counties we've ran the job sweeps in. I will tell you, it's getting very depressing to see licensed contractors with unlicensed and expired people out there performing the electric work, but that's exactly why we're out there. We continue, we stop by anytime we see electric work going on, doesn't matter if trucks are marked or unmarked. We stop by, visit with them, not only to check the license, but to answer any questions they may have. It helps out a lot. We've helped a lot of contractors out with questions that they didn't know about. We've also actually helped them find out about employees that may have been taking advantage of them that weren't supposed to be where we found them at. If you look down at the other notable activities, meetings we had, I would actually ask you to pay attention to June 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. We had some devastating disasters here in Texas, up in Van, Texas, the floodings down in Wimberley. BOAT, the Building Officials Association of Texas, has got a plan in place to help the cities that don't have the resources when they're devastated. They actually go in and perform the damage assessment for these cities and help out. I will let you know that myself as well as Larry Reichel are on the list to help them out. That's why we were in Van, to help educate them on the licensing law and rule and who can be there working in the affected area. And then on the 2nd and 3rd in Wimberley, we actually spent from morning till dark going through these damaged houses. Now, as an inspector, it's one thing to inspect it, but you find out you become a counselor too, because these people's lives are devastated. They can't move on. They don't know if their house is able to be rebuilt, if we need to get an engineer in there to review it and see if it's able to be repaired. But being out there in the front line, it actually helps our Texan citizens get back to restored and their lives back to normal, if that's even possible. But I will tell you, some of the best work I've done being here is out there helping these people. And I would highly recommend that if it happens in your city or anywhere in your area, that they get a hold of boats so we can get out there and help them to recover as fast as possible. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Any questions for Mr. Daniel? Jerry, I've got one. On August the 3rd to the 5th, you attended the National Electricians Reciprocity Alliance in New Mexico. Can you kind of give us an overview of how that meeting went, please?
Yes, I can. It was actually Mr. Reichel and me. It was a very good meeting. One of the big things we needed to do, as you know yourself being there, they have never allowed a proxy vote. In other words, only the voting member could actually vote. So if you were at the table and your voting member was not there, you could not vote. The department did allow me to be the voting member this year to go in there. We did get a proxy vote put in. So from this point forward at a meeting, if myself or whoever is the voting member at TDLR cannot make it, they can assign a proxy vote. So whoever is there will have a vote at the table. That was one of the good things that came about it. I will tell you, the question was asked about taking the examination before the 8,000 hours. That's going to cancel our reciprocity agreements. We've drawn a bottom line that set the bar on these agreements. These agreements that were signed were 8,000 hours and passed the state exam. Now, there are a couple of states that do allow it a little early, but if those people take that exam early, they clearly stamp on their record they're not eligible for reciprocity, nor will they ever be eligible by taking it early. That's something that could be looked at, but Utah did express that it has caused them problems in the past from doing it, and they're looking at doing away with it altogether. Other than that, it was the general things discussed. We did have Alabama, which we have made a reciprocity agreement for journeymen with. I'm not sure if it's finalized with Executive Office and General Counsel, but they were there at the meeting to actually see about becoming part of NERA. But for whatever reason, they couldn't stay for the meeting, so I could not nominate them without being there to answer questions. So next year's meeting in Minnesota, hopefully they'll be there, be able to answer questions, and we can get another state in. We've got 17 presently. This meeting was the first meeting I've been to that we have the calendar full of where the meetings will be through 2020. Normally, it's like pulling teeth to get somebody to volunteer for a meeting, but ever since we've had our meeting in Austin last year, everybody has wanted to get on board and show that they can do a good meeting also.
All right, thank you, Jerry. Any other questions concerning? the
Chairman Bell?
compliance? Yes, sir.
Jerry, real quick, on the, taking the test at 6,000 hours, you know, when we kick that around amongst the troops here, and understanding full well, they can't get a license until their 8,000 hours are in. They're only being allowed to sit for the exam. What part of that rubs the folks the wrong way? I don't get it.
Well, they've set the bar in the agreement as the 8,000 hours and the exam, and that's why. And that's what they've said. This group has been about setting the bar, and if you want to come in and dilute it or water it down, then maybe you don't need to be part of this group. And they made that real clear. Again, we would have to talk to our general counsel, but some of the other states indicated that their attorneys have said it doesn't matter when a man takes a test. If you let him take it at 6,000, you have to issue the license because he passed it.
Really?
Now, I don't know how our general counsel would feel about that, but theirs has done ruled that. That's why some of the states are not going to go there because of that.
Okay.
But the bottom line, we're in this group with reciprocity. We were the new kids on the block, and we told them that we would meet the bar that they established for us. And if we wish to, in good faith, be part of this and continue, we have to honor our agreement that we made.
Okay, thank you, Jerry.
Thanks, Jerry.
Brian Francis, Deputy Executive Director. I don't even think we need to wait for a general counsel on that. If they pass the examination at 6,000, they're going to wait till 8,000 before they get a license here in Texas. That's not going to change. Those are still independent requirements for a person to achieve a license.
Gotcha. All right, thank you, Brian. Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Jerry, for your attending to NERA, and I want to thank the department. I mean, I know you guys got to get funding to be able to send him to do that. And, you know, we got, even if you have the proxy now, it's just highly important that we have a seat at that table.
Being there
And
is so
thank
important.
you.
Having Jerry there is,
Right.
it's been phenomenal.
I just want to commend the department for using your resources, which I know are probably limited, to send him
Thank you.
over there to that. So, thank you.
I'd like to thank the department, too, for letting Mr. Larry Reichel go, because it is very important that the person behind me knows what's going on, is fully aware, because, let's be for real, today's today. I may not be here by the grace of God tomorrow. So having somebody that can fill in immediately is very important to keep this program running at all cylinders and not stop.
That'll work. Thank you, Jerry. Appreciate your report. Moving on to F3 Enforcement Division. At this time, the chair would recognize Mr. John Medlock. Mr. Medlock.
Good morning. My name is John Medlock. I am a prosecutor with the Enforcement Division. I thought I'd begin my presentation with a brief overview of some of the enforcement activities since our last meeting before highlighting the cases and the statistics. As you know, the Enforcement Division, through its investigation section, routinely will set up stings to try to catch unlicensed individuals. These stings typically bear out some of our best evidence of unlicensed activity because we get ads, bids, and photos of the unlicensed activity occurring. Sometimes our investigators will partner with local television stations that will employ the hidden cameras to record these activities during the stings. Reporters will show up after the individuals have come and will, ask them the questions in the kind of the gotcha manner. These partnerships are great tools for the department because not only does it help us, but it also helps get the word out to the public when these TV stations will air these stings, to let them know that the general public needs to make sure that they have properly licensed individuals when they are going out for their electrical needs. In the recent months, the department has conducted 2 different sting operations. The first occurred May 9th through the 12th in San Antonio in a commercial setting. The department was very successful, that's relatively speaking, of course, with the turnout. The contacts yielded 33 cases for unlicensed activity. This sting was also covered by Dylan Collier, a reporter with the local CBS affiliate there in San Antonio, and it was aired. The other sting was conducted from June 22nd to the 24th in the Odessa area. This sting was also covered by a local Odessa CBS affiliate. The department's public relations officer, Susan Stanford, also provided an interview for that CBS report. In that sting, we yielded 19 cases for unlicensed activity. Moving to some of the highlighted cases, there are 4 cases which resulted in a default order and 1 which resulted in an agreed order that was signed. Just as a refresher, anytime a default order is signed, it's a case where the respondent has either made no effort to contact the department or to settle the matter. And then our executive director, Mr. Bill Coons, will also sign off on those orders. Agreed orders are cases where the respondent has made contact with the department and has come into some kind of settlement agreement with the department and is making payment on those cases. The default cases are, the first one was against Ignacio Ortega. Mr. Ortega offered to perform work on multiple occasions and took payment for those services, which were not either rendered or only rendered in part. At the time the offers were made, Mr. Ortega's license was revoked for failure to pay on a previous default order. Because of the previous default order, these violations in the current case were deemed second violations, so we enhanced the penalty on those cases, and it resulted in a payment or a penalty assessed of $23,000. The case is currently with the Attorney General's office for collections. The next case involves John Cosi. Mr. Cosi was assessed an administrative penalty of $7,500 because he performed work without a license, used another's license without permission, and posted websites offering services without the required electrical contractor license. His case was also defaulted and is also currently over at the Attorney General's office for collections. Next, we have Ronaldo Villarreal. This gentleman entered into multiple contracts to perform electrical services without holding an electrical contractor's license. He also took money for these jobs and failed to either finish or provide these services. Mr. Villarreal did admit to these violations and was assessed a $6,000 penalty. However, after admitting to these violations, he kind of dropped off the face and has not made any further contact with the department, so his case was defaulted, and it is currently being pursued by the department for collections. The final case, which resulted in a default, was a man by the name of Shane Nadal. Mr. Nadal used another's electrical contractor's license and a master's license to register with the City of Houston and to pull various permits. He was assessed a penalty of $6,000. The case was eventually defaulted and it is over with the Department for Collections. The one agreed order is a case that was signed by Mr. Jerry Jones. Mr. Jones had a master's license revoked in 2013. He retained, to this day, still his journeyman's license and continued to pull permits and perform work without the valid contractor's license. This was the second violation for Mr. Jones, but he has agreed to settle the case and is making payments towards that agreed order. Overall, since the last meeting in December, we've had 410 cases that were closed with a disciplinary action, with nearly half being for unlicensed activity. The penalties assessed for those unlicensed folks total nearly $400,000. The department has also issued nearly 200 cease and desist orders for unlicensed activities as well since the last meeting. The final thing I'd like to point out are some of the relevant statistics. All the statistics that I'll be giving were for the last fiscal year, which ended in this past August. In the last fiscal year, the department opened over 2,000 new electrical complaints while resolving just over 2,700. The department as a whole opened over 10,000 new complaints across all of our programs, and we resolved nearly 13,000. In the electrical program, last fiscal year we had 158 agreed orders compared to nearly $2,300 for the department as a whole, with penalties being assessed in the electrical program of over $600,000, and the department assessed over $4.5 million. And finally, we collected over $150,000 in the electrical program, while the department brought in around $2.3 million in this last fiscal year. This does conclude my presentation. I would be happy to answer any questions.
Any board members have any questions concerning the Enforcement Division report? Hearing none, Mr. Medlock, we appreciate your report.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to clarify, was that the Jerry Jones, and is this why the Cowboys are doing what they're doing?
Unfortunately,
Not playing with much spark?
unfortunately, we researched that. We tried to look into it. If I could have pulled his ownership and GM status, I would have. But
Okay.
it was a different Jerry
All right,
Jones.
so it was a different one, okay.
I tried my hardest.
I was trying to make the connection why there's no connection, it's not connecting. I just saw the electrical
I
humor.
understand. I'm not gonna touch that, Mr. Francis. I don't wanna be on YouTube this afternoon. So, though I'd be in good company, but.
That's right, you're right.
I'll just stay, I'll stand down. Under F4, Education Examination Division, Chair recognizes Mr. Ray Pizarro. Pizarro.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'm Ray Pizarro, Director of Education Examination. I don't have my Longhorn shirt on today.
They're cheap.
No comments on that.
I don't blame
you. Moving on. We had a examination review committee meeting back in August 25th through the 27th. Same maintenance type of thing, just looking over poorly performing items and making sure that the examinations are intact. One of the big things that occurred earlier this year, in February, we, as you know, our contract ends with our third-party vendor on exam administration, and that usually comes up every 6 years. So we put out an RFP. The commission approved the contract once again to PSI, and they will be our contracting exam administrator, development, and maintenance for the next 6 years. It's a 2-year renewal process. With that said, we have, as a result of that, we're now going to, starting September 1, we're now going to be saving over $250,000 yearly with the reduction of fees. And that's kind of in line of where TDLR likes to be, to try to reduce fees for all of our licensees. And these are potential licensees, so this is a good thing. So you'll notice the exam fee in the candidate information bulletin for electrical, and all of the other ones have been reduced. As Brian mentioned earlier, divisions have been changing. We have been growing. One of the things that we're tackling now in our innovation is to try to capture all of the different types of emails that we are answering in the Education Examination Division. This last month, we've answered over 1,300 emails, and specifically on the driver education and safety side, the division answered about 225 emails. So we have this new tool that we're able to run those as the emails come in. It'll kind of keep a tally of what types of emails we're getting. And what that means to you is if we get some of the reoccurring emails or problematic emails with respect to electrical, we'll be able to pinpoint that and try to correct any issues that may be for that particular problem. As Brian mentioned, also we've been growing, and we are now doing inspections, and those are inspections for education providers. So that would include, it won't affect you guys, but that would include barber, cosmetology, some of the programs that are coming over from the Department of State Health Services, and of course the newly acquired program that started September 1, the driver education, driver safety program. We'll be doing inspections on those, and of course reviewing and approving all of their courses. As of September 1, since we started the inspection process, we've only been inspecting right now the barber and cos schools, and we've done right around 100 in that 1 month. Of course, those numbers are going to be changing as we get things going with the new advisory board of the driver education, and we set some standards on how to inspect those. I would like to, since they're here, I'd like to introduce you to Carrie Hodges. She's our team leader for the driver education and safety section. She's back here. And Brian Beal sitting next to her, he's one of our staff members under that section as well. They'll be helping us and of course, there's other members from the driver training program throughout our agency. They'll be all helping us to try to get this thing rocking and rolling and make sure that it runs a smooth transition as we implement them. As you can see further down on page 2, I put in there specifically for you, Keith, the examination pass rate for the journeyman exam. As you know, back on September 1, 2014, we moved the cut score from 75 to 70. So this is kind of giving you an illustration of how we've been doing, how the exam has been performing since September 1, basically for a year. To give you a perspective, the folks that have, how do I say this, there has been, since 2014, September 1, there has been 125 candidates who have passed the exam as a result of moving that cut score. As you can see, there's some of the statistics are pretty consistent. Couple of last things I do want to share with you. PSI has been finding and been finding candidates cheating on the exam in a unique way, is a different way we're catching them. They're actually gluing pages into the NEC book, and we've been catching those folks and prohibiting them from testing. Either we tell them you can't test, you can't take the book in, or you can use one of the books we have, and the majority of them will decline to take the test. We are on top of that. Since the new contract, we have made changes on security. One of the big things is we have audio now throughout the exam sites, and there's other things that we're beefing up. It's a cat and mouse game. We just want to make sure that our exams are intact. So that's one of the big things. They're gluing pages into the NEC, and we're catching those folks. That's all I have for right now. If you guys have any questions for me, I'll be happy to answer them.
Any questions for our Education Examination Division? Ray, I just got a couple. I was looking at your report, and just to qualify, there's a new person, Marco Rodriguez.
Yes.
That's going to be the school inspection site visits section. Is that going to be for our providers, the continuing ed providers, or is that for your overall?
It'll be, so Marco, that section is going to be inspecting, as I said earlier, schools, but they're also going to be doing, they'll be doing some site visits to our exam sites and to our continuing education providers. We're going to get there to try to start auditing these folks and make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. So that team is going to be doing a lot of those types of things.
Right. Well, I appreciate that, because there's always been some concern by some of the providers that the quality of others, and so with you putting that in place, then that should either, qualify that or squelch it, one or the other. So,
absolutely.
Thank you. And then you said 125 people had passed for with a cut score. Is that just the journeyman, or is that overall?
Just the journeyman. I just gave you that number for the journeyman, since I know we're looking at that specifically. That was just that basically that 125 is the group between 75 or 74 through 70.
Right, and that number is 1,550 for physical 15, and you're looking at 14 numbers, correct? Or 15?
Hold on. What now?
All I was trying to do is just looking at a ratio that when you said that 125, that was on the 115?
Yes, that was correct.
So we're talking about 125 out of 1,550, which is about 8.5%.
Correct.
So it's not making this huge significant difference.
As we spoke, we didn't,
let
yes.
the cows out of the barn here.
Correct.
So that was on my point.
Right, and that's why I wanted to illustrate that to you as we spoke before. Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for Mr. Pizarro? Thank you, Ray. Appreciate all you do. Moving on to item F5 is licensing division. At this time, the chair recognizes Ms. Lisa Hodak.
Good morning, Chairman, board members. I'm Lisa Hodak, licensing manager. I've presented you with the last 4 years of the licensing statistics. Overall, we're seeing some increase in regards to the total population for our masters has increased. The journeyman, we've seen an overall increase of almost 500. Our apprentices are also continuing to grow. Last year, we were at 56,000, and most recent, we're at 62,000. And the majority of those, of course, are applying online. Our overall total population, fiscal year 2014, was at over 121,000, and last fiscal year was at 129,000. So we're continuing to see an increase, which of course is continuing to keep us busy in this program. And I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Anyone have any questions concerning the licensing report?
Thank you.
Ms. Hodak. Moving on to item G is discussion and possible action to recommend changes to the penalty matrix for electricians. So you want to present that item to you, that will be item G in your packet.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, board members. I'm Christina Kaiser. I'm the Director of the Enforcement Division. I'm going to try to pour some water here without pouring it all over the table. See how coordinated I am. Joining me is Chris Russey. He is the Research and Analytics Specialist for the Enforcement Division. He's the person who does the majority of the actual hard work when we go to update one of these penalty matrices. And he's going to have the matrix up on the board for everyone in the room to be able to see. And also, as we're going along, if you wanted to see what a specific provision of the statute or the rules actually says, we have that available as well if you want to pull it up and take a look at it. Since it's been a really long time since we, as a group, have talked about the penalty matrix, I thought I would start by giving you a little bit of background just to bring you back up to speed. To kind of remember what a penalty matrix is even for. This document is published to put the industry and to put the public on notice of the penalties or license sanctions that an individual is subject to if he commits a violation of our statute or rules for electricians. So that's the outward-looking purpose. Inside our house, inside the Enforcement Division, the penalty matrix serves as guidance for the prosecutors. As John was telling you, we have many, many cases that go the route of formal enforcement action in the electricians program. So when a prosecutor is ready to prepare the notice of alleged violation, which is the charging instrument, the thing that we send out that says you committed this violation and here's what we want to ask for in terms of a penalty, the prosecutor consults the penalty matrix, and it provides a framework to help ensure that the prosecutors are consistent across cases that have similar fact patterns. A couple of things that the penalty matrix is not. It does not create new law. It simply, when we prepare the matrix, we simply scour through the statute and scour through the rules and find every provision that could create a violation that we would take enforcement action for. We lift those out of the statutes and rules and we plop them into the matrix. And we summarize them, we paraphrase them, put them in short form language so that it's easy to get through the document. But that's important to remember because sometimes when we have discussions about penalty matrices, we lapse into discussions about, well, the law shouldn't require that. And this is not really the place to talk about that. That's something to talk about the next time you look at rule changes. Another thing that the penalty matrix is not is it does not represent the entire enforcement process. It does not represent all possible outcomes of enforcement cases. You remember John talked about, I believe it was 400 electrician cases that resulted in formal enforcement action. Well, probably 1.5 or 2 times that many more cases were resolved with some informal method. Either we closed the case with a finding of insufficient evidence of a violation. We might have closed the case with a simple warning. We might have closed the case with a finding that the matter was resolved because the electrician got with the consumer and made things right. So all of those cases that are resolved by some informal method where we're not even going to go the route of a notice of alleged violation, those aren't reflected in this penalty matrix anywhere. We still have a whole lot of discretion that we actually exercise in the majority of cases to not go the formal route. The electrician penalty matrix was last published, it was last updated by you and approved by the commission and published in April of 2007. So if it feels like it's been a long time since we've talked about this, it really has. We have updated the matrix, the one that's in front of you today, to bring the violations and the citations of law in line with the current statute and rules. Since the matrix was last published, again, April 2007, the electrician statute has been amended in every legislative session since then. That was 5 legislative sessions, 2007, 9, 11, 12, and 11, 13, and 15, excuse me. Surprisingly, these statute changes did not have much effect on the penalty matrix. The statute does not contain a large number of provisions that give rise to violations. It sets out the broad fundamentals, like the requirement to hold a license and the responsibility to perform electrical work in compliance with codes. The statute changes since 2007 have not really impacted those fundamentals. The most significant changes to the statute in that time have involved adding new license types. Those included residential appliance installers and contractors in 2007, and then journeyman linemen in 2013. But when these new license types were added, the legislature did not add new or unique standards of conduct for those license types. Rather, those new license types simply came into that existing structure of fundamentals that are there in the statute. The rules are a little bit of a different matter. The electrician rules set out more detailed standards of conduct and other enforceable responsibilities for electricians. Since April 2007, the rules have been amended 9 times. Out of those 9 rounds of rule changes, there were only 2 that had a significant impact on the penalty matrix that's in front of you today. Those were the rule changes that took effect on December 1 of 2007 and January 1 of 2010. And there was a 3rd one that had a little bit of impact. Those were effective in March of 2012. Let me just give you the highlights of those. The first set of rules that actually you see some changes from it showing up in this penalty matrix today were the December 1st, 2007 rules. There, the residential appliance installer and residential appliance installation contractor were added to the statute, added to the rules after they were added to the statute. You also added some requirements for all types of contractors to maintain records of work performed for 4 years after completion and make those available to TDLR. So you'll see that showing up in the matrix now. Added responsibility for all types of contractors to supervise all licensees performing work on their behalf. And added a new section setting out responsibilities of residential appliance installation contractors that mirrored those responsibilities that were already there for other types of contractors. The second rule package, the ones from January 1st, 2010, expanded quite a bit on the responsibilities of contractors. You know, in the rules there are 3 sets of responsibilities for contractors: for electrical contractors, electrical sign contractors, and then the residential appliance installation contractors. Say that 3 times real fast. And all of those were expanded quite a bit in the January 2010 rules. Responsibilities were added for contractors to notify TDLR when the assigned licensee changes, to provide safe and proper installation and service, to assure the electromechanical integrity of all work. That was a new concept that grew up in the rules during that time. To not misrepresent the need for services, to not make fraudulent promises or false statements to induce a person to contract for services. And those concepts about not misrepresenting things and not committing fraud, they were already in the rules from the very beginning in a general way, under the section entitled Standards of Conduct. But in this rule package, these provisions were put in there with more detail under the responsibilities of each contractor. This round of rules also added provisions related to the design of electrical systems, saying that must be done by a licensed person and cannot be subcontracted to an unlicensed person. It also expanded the provisions relating to advertising and set out in quite a bit of detail what forms of advertising do and do not require the contractor's name and or license number. So those are the two big ones. There was one third one in March of 2012 that had a few provisions in it that impacted the matrix. One rule change in March of 2012 removed a very detailed listing of documentation that was acceptable as proof of on-the-job training for applicants and replaced it with a general provision requiring verifiable documentation submitted by a master on the request of the department. And another provision removed a licensee's obligation to inform the consumer of facts that gave rise to a duty to withdraw from employment. I don't know if y'all remember that being in the rules, but for a while there was a provision saying you must withdraw from employment if certain things happen, but if you don't withdraw, you got to tell the consumer why you should have. Well, that was kind of nonsensical, I think, and it never happened in the real world, so we took that out of the rules. So I would like to walk you through the penalty matrix. And I can tell you that beyond the statute and rule updates, we made a few other changes to the matrix. We changed some of the language to just clarify some of the violations. We added a few violations that had actually been in the law or the rules for a really long time, even before 2007, but we just left them out of the last matrix. We added subject matter headings within each class. So if you'll take a look at the matrix, you see under the blocks that set out the first, second, and third penalties, the headings like administrative violations, advertising violations, and so forth. That's new to this matrix, and we're hoping that this will make it easier for someone to find a specific violation that they're looking for. We have used this in other matrices, and it's been fairly helpful, and it's been well received by our licensees. We did move a few violations to higher or lower classes, and I'll highlight those when we get to them. And finally, in Class D, the highest class, we added an option for a penalty as another option instead of just having revocation as the only possible outcome there. So let me walk you through the changes that we made, and here's what I need from you. The violations in each class should be about the same level of seriousness. So if you see a violation that you think is in the wrong class, either it's less serious than its neighbors or it's more serious than the other violations in that class, let us know. That's one of the most important things we need to hear from you, because you are much more aware of the real world of this industry than we are. And also, please pay attention to those subject matter headings. We want those to be helpful. We want them to add clarity, and if you think they take clarity away or they could be stated in a better way, tell us that as well. At the end of the day, I'm going to be asking that you vote to approve, or rather vote to recommend that the commission approve this penalty matrix to be published. So in Class A, in the blocks that set out the penalty amounts, you'll see that we struck the possibility of a reprimand, and instead we just left it at a penalty of up to $1,000. We recommended taking out the reprimand. That's a license sanction. Now granted, it is the lowest form of license sanction, but we thought a license sanction for a first violation of a Class A sounds a little severe, and it's just not something we ever do in enforcement. So we thought we would just strike that out. You'll see under administrative violations, we've added 2 provisions. These were added to the rules in 2010, failing to notify the department when a new licensee of record is assigned, or within 30 days after a licensee is no longer employed. The advertising violations.
Can I ask a question right there?
Yes.
Ms. Cotter? The licensee you're referring to in administrative violations would be the master of record.
Yes.
For that company.
Yes.
Right? Okay.
Yes.
The question. So it's incumbent upon the licensed master to give notice.
It's incumbent upon the company, I believe.
The company. Okay. Just I needed that clarification.
The contractor, the licensed contractor. Under advertising violations, this violation was already here in an old version of the matrix, but it was separated. Part of it was in Class B and part of it was in Class A. So we took the part that was in Class B and brought it back down, so everything is in Class A now. So failing to include the name and or the license number in advertising is now in Class A. The public notice violations All of these violations were already there. We just cleaned up the language a little bit. For example, on the second one, failed to display the business name and contractor license number on each vehicle used in the conduct of electrical work. We just thought that sounded a little more clear than each company vehicle. Class B,
Ms. Kaiser, Keith
Yes.
Bell, and I agree with you, I think the change of the language makes this really clear of what your intent is to be. Just to pony up on Mr. Roach's question, all these violations that you've listed here of Class A would be for the company.
these are,
I mean, they would be sanctions against the company or the owner of the company. In an event where the master and the company are two different individuals, these would be corporate violations, correct?
they could actually be charged against either one.
Is that right?
They are, I believe, stated in the law as responsibilities of the contractors, because you see they are listed, the citations include 73, 51, 52, and 54. Those are all sections in the rules that set out contractors' responsibilities. However, we may, if the circumstances warrant, charge violations against the master as well.
Okay. Thank you.
In Class B, you'll see at the top a couple of provisions that we removed from this matrix. The first one is that advertising one that I said we moved down to Class A. The second one is unlicensed activity, which we have moved up to Class C. This is the more serious form of that unlicensed activity, the truly unlicensed person, and so we have, we are recommending anyway that this be moved to a higher class to make them subject to higher penalties. The second subject, or the actual first subject matter heading, the records violations, these were added to the rules in the December 2007 rule package. These are the responsibilities to maintain employee records and records of all work performed for 4 years after the work is completed, and to make those available to the department. Insurance violations, these have already been in the matrix for a long time, except that we had left one out, this failing to obtain insurance from an appropriate company. There's some detail in the rules about it must be a company that does business in Texas, essentially, that is approved by the Department of Insurance. You'll see here we have a category of unlicensed activity. This unlicensed activity that's in Class B is what we consider the lesser serious form of unlicensed activity. This is performing work with an expired license. We've made this distinction in the way we have approached these cases for a while. We typically will seek less of a penalty against someone who's got an expired license as opposed to someone who has no license at all. The thought being, if you have had a license at some point, you are less likely to bring harm to the public because you probably know what you're doing. The second violation there is something new, failing to ensure that all electrical work was performed by licensed individuals. Formerly, that was described using the struck out language, contractor allowing an unlicensed person to perform work. We place this here in Class B because this would be a violation that is committed by a licensed person. Now, if you have a different thought process about that, I know Mr. Daniel mentioned earlier about the number of contractors that he's seeing employing unlicensed people. So if you think this is a bigger issue and it should be moved to Class C, definitely tell us that. Improper use of a license, these are all existing violations. We just cleaned the language up a little bit. Yes, sir.
Under that last page, unlicensed activity failed to provide all electrical work through a licensed contractor. So you
Yes.
could hold a general contractor accountable for not hiring a licensed electrical contractor.
We
Is
applied.
that the intent?
No, that's not the intent. We apply this violation to, for example, a journeyman that's going out on his own and moonlighting. Some of those individuals we catch in stings from time to time. This would be a violation applicable to them.
So there's still no provision to hold a contractor accountable for using unlicensed electrical contractor on a project?
That's not a case that we would typically pursue because we don't regulate general contractors.
Gotcha.
If the facts of the case demonstrate that the person is truly a general contractor, we wouldn't go after them.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I can interject here, you'll bear in mind that in order to make the penalty matrix read well, they may abbreviate some of the language here, but that underlying rule language and that underlying statutory language is going to be the driver. So even if you see just failed to, and that's what Christina was saying early on, this doesn't create new law or new rules. It's just trying to put it in a layperson, more of a plain talk way of reading it. But at the end of the day, the real violation is the rule language. It is the statutory language that's referenced over there in that far column.
And Ms. Kaiser, Keith Bell, I think you made that clear. I mean, when you gave an example of moonlighting by a licensee, in other
Right.
words, a German working for the public, then
Right.
that makes that clear. Thanks.
Moving on to Class C, you'll see the first violation there is struck through. That's the one that was removed from the rules. We talked about that a little earlier. Administrative violations, including altering a license or failing to provide the department documentation of on-the-job training for an applicant. This is actually something that's been a responsibility for a long time, but we have actually seen it raise its head just recently. Someone applies for a license that requires proof of a certain level of experience, and the person approaches the master who they used to work under, and the master is unwilling to provide the proof that the department requests. So as I said, this has been in the law all the time. The master is required to give that proof up, specifically if it's requested by the department, and failing to do that can give rise to a violation. Under the heading of quality of work, we have things like performing electrical work that is not in compliance with the local ordinances, performing work that's not in compliance with the National Electrical Code that's adopted by the department, and those new provisions that were added to the rules that we talked about, failing to provide safe and proper installation and service, and failing to assure the electromechanical integrity of the work. We also added in this category of quality of work, failing to supervise all licensees to assure compliance with statutes, rules, and standards of conduct. Under standards of conduct, these violations, for the most part, have been in the law for a really long time. These are those general standards that you, I believe, added to the rules in the very beginning, the first set of rules you ever adopted. There are two new ones at the top, misrepresenting the need for services and making the fraudulent promise. We talked about those being added to the rules in the 2010 version. But the rest of these have been in the rules for a long time, and they're those general standards, not engaging in things that constitute dishonesty, misrepresentation, or fraud, not engaging in threats, coercion, or extortion, not furnishing inaccurate, deceitful, or misleading information to the department or a consumer. Those really high-level responsibilities that reflect, the ethics of the person. And then here on the last page, you'll see that the new category of unlicensed activity that we moved here from Class B, the true unlicensed activity, someone who's never had any kind of a license. And then we also added here, design the electrical system without the appropriate license, because we understand from our compliance division folks, Mr. Daniel and Mr. Reichel, that the design is a really big deal. So we thought that would be appropriately placed in Class C. And then similarly, subcontracting design to an unlicensed person. And then finally in Class...
Ms.
Yes,
Kaiser,
sir.
let me back up just 1 second. Under the quality of work, the first two bullets, one's within a municipality perform electrical work that was not in compliance with all applicable local ordinances. And then the second bullet's in an unincorporated area of the state, perform non-exempt electrical work which is not in compliance with the National Electric Code adopted by the department. The reason I bring that up, that differentiates two different things. Number one, the work in a municipality of which there are ordinances. And though, the municipalities do adopt codes and whatever version that they choose to adopt, one of the biggest difficulties for electrical contractors is the state will adopt the code pretty much as soon as it's available for us to do so, but the municipality may be adopting a code that's 2 or 3 versions behind.
Right.
Okay, and so what we wanted to, are you trying to separate that so that if a contractor actually performs per the ordinance and the electrical code version that's adopted in that community, then you're compliant.
Right.
So that in an unincorporated area, we have to use actually the version, the adoption of the current National Electric Code in the state. Is that what we're trying to do?
Yes, that's how I interpret the laws that are referenced there.
And that's my point. You know, there's many multiple municipalities we work in have all, you know, we may be in a 14 code, they may be in 11. They may be in the 2008. And so our concerns were being held at 14 when the communities run 8, for instance. So I just wanted to make that clear.
Right.
Great, thank you. I appreciate you doing that.
And on the second page of the quality of work stuff, you'll see there's another provision there that applies to that same situation. Performed electrical work that did not comply with all applicable codes and ordinances. That one actually kind of wraps up those other two. But since it was stated somewhere else in the law, we set it out separately. On the last page, moving into Class D, you'll see in the blocks for the first, second, and third violations, there's new language underlined there, and/or up to $5,000. Previously, if someone committed a violation that was in this class, the only outcome that was available to the prosecutors was to seek revocation of the license. And that was problematic because some of the things that are done in this class of violations can be done by someone who doesn't have a license. So there's nothing to revoke. So we wanted, for example, obtaining, actually this should say obtaining or attempting to obtain. The third violation down, obtained a license by fraud or false representation. Actually, we need to modify that to say obtained or attempted, because the attempted is the problem. If someone attempted to commit fraud in getting a license, but we caught them, and so we didn't give them the license, we still want to penalize them for that act. There's no license to take away, so the only other thing we can do is assess a penalty against them. And similarly, the violation of the exam security requirement, some of the stuff that Ray was talking about earlier, if people get caught cheating, they're not going to be given a pass on the exam, or they're going to be blocked so that they can't get their license, and so there's no license to take away for that violation. So we want to be able to penalize those people. That's what this is about. So I am happy to answer any questions that you have, or if you wanted to suggest any modifications. Ultimately, I'm asking that you vote to recommend that the commission approve this new matrix to be included in the department's enforcement plan.
Thank you, Ms. Kaiser. Any questions concerning the revised penalty matrix for the electricians department?
Chairman Bell?
Yes, sir.
Randy Palmer call. Ms. Kaiser, just to clear my mind up so I understand what we're doing here on. Earlier, before we went through the matrix, you were discussing about some of these violations not following the formal route to prosecution or whatever, that they get resolved before they get there, in other words?
Yes.
And the electrician, he did something wrong, but he came in and talked to y'all, and he said, I'm not ever going to do it again. I'm making this up, but you follow what I'm saying?
Yes, sir.
So it doesn't go to court or whatever.
Right.
Is that still the first violation?
No. If
Okay.
if a case is resolved informally with simply a closing letter, that doesn't count as a person's first violation. It's a violation only exists after there's been an order entered where there is a finding made that that person committed a violation.
Okay. Then, okay, my next question. So following the same lines or same thought process, you have Jerry and Larry are out doing a sting operation on a project somewhere. They find where this contractor has 3 or 4 licensed individuals working and 2 that are not licensed doing electrical work. They write them up, turn their report into whoever they turn the report in back here. Now, in my opinion, when you go over there, that's doing electrical work without licensed personnel. That needs to go over here to the correct category. I think it was
That's in Class B right now?
Class B.
Yes, sir. It's the second violation under unlicensed activity.
well, And the contractor comes in and talks to you and says, I'm sorry, these guys, we hired them on, they didn't have time to get their license and so on and so forth. And in my opinion, now you realize I am a contractor and we try to do it right. But that contractor knew those guys were not licensed and he's out there working them. When Jerry and Larry turned those guys in, there should not be anything that's not a formal route on that type of violation. That needs to go to the first violation under Class B, and the guy needs to get a fine. And as soon as you fine me for doing something wrong, I'm gonna quit doing it wrong, in other words. So that's just my opinion. So this is, everything you guys have done here, I'm in agreement with. I would like to add the language, we'll do this whenever Chairman Bell calls for it, that you wanted to add.
On Class D?
In D.
Yes, sir.
Add that to it. But I guess I'm just confused. When is it an informal, I don't understand when informal and formal penalties come to play. Or I understand simple things like, all right, you don't have the name on your side of your truck. Okay, these guys do that. I'll probably have a new truck somewhere that doesn't have a name on it for a couple of weeks until I get my stickers. So,
Right.
Those kind of things I understand, but specific violations where they're caught. Municipalities, whenever, and I'm just going to pick the city of Austin because that's where we are, whenever the electrical inspectors in the city of Austin, which are trained professionals who know exactly what they're looking at, when they see violations that go beyond the city's, mostly licensing violations, the city has no licensing anymore, and they turn those in to you guys as unlicensed activity, that's almost a no-brainer if you've got a city official who has signed off on that. We need to go back to there's no informal thing about it. It
Right.
needs to go
Right.
right straight to a fine. Now, that's just my opinion, and I don't know how you guys can get that operating in that manner if you want to inside this department. It's just my thoughts. And what brought that up is when you were talking about settling disputes without having to go through,
Right.
through formal complaining.
A couple of things that I would say in response to that. There are two different categories of things that will be resolved informally. Recognize that anyone can walk in here and file a complaint against anybody at any time. So there are some cases that after investigation, we can't prove that somebody did anything wrong. So that's not the category of stuff that you're talking about, but that is one category of cases that get closed informally with a finding of insufficient evidence or not our jurisdiction or whatever. So those get out of the way. There are also some violations, some cases where the investigation reveals there was an actual violation, but we will still resolve those informally, like I said, if the electrician has made things right with the consumer. Or if it's something like you said, not having the trucks marked, if the electrician shows us that he has done what is required under the law. I can tell you that resolving things informally when there is an actual violation represented is much more likely to happen with this stuff that's in Class A
Right.
than in the higher classes. The unlicensed activity is not something where if we have proof of a violation, where we're just going to say, okay, never mind. I think in John's report, something like 50% of all the cases that we pursue formally and seek penalties are unlicensed activity. That is clear to us that is a priority of this advisory board and of this industry at large. And that's not going to be something that typically gets, we'll take your word that you're not going to do this again kind of thing. That doesn't happen.
Right. Okay, well, I've always had it explained to me that, very typically the speed limit's 70. Keith Bell drives 85 miles an hour all the way here every day. He doesn't
You
get caught.
can't substantiate it. That's hearsay, and
I'll be right there with you, Mr. Bell. That's okay.
Stricken from the record.
Stricken from the record.
So if he gets caught, and the police officer pulls him over, Keith hadn't received a ticket in the last 20 years, and he gives him a warning. I understand that's what you guys are doing in some cases, and
Right.
we get that, we understand all that on the Class A violations.
Right.
But this entire department's about licensing, and if you don't have one and you're doing, there's no ifs, ands, buts about it. If Jerry and Larry catch them, they're in violation. I would like to see, in addition to Jerry and Larry's guys, when their sting operate, I believe that city officials, the building inspectors and the municipalities that have building inspection departments, that their complaints and what they send over to you be given maybe not priority over others, but at least a little more consideration, because these are building officials.
Right.
And these guys are paid to do what they do. And in the city of Austin, they're good. And the city of Dallas, Fort Worth, they're good. Houston, they're good. They know what they're looking for. But we don't have a means to do anything for the unlicensed activity as far as getting them. That's this department's deal right here.
Right.
So if there's anything you guys can talk amongst yourselves about what the city officials find to send over, given it some, not priority, but some sort of special consideration, maybe get back to them a little quicker than others. I mean, you got thousands of them, so I mean,
Right.
it can't everybody be at the top of the list, but we'd like to be, but,
Okay.
all right, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I may add, just even in the context of this conversation, even unlicensed activity is different here. You may recall Mr. Medlock talking about the stings versus the sweeps. The stings, we actually have somebody coming in, offering to do work. We have contracts, we have written information, we have them red-handed doing the work. Sometimes the sweeps, when we go out there, we see the person on the site, but we don't see them doing work. We see them present, and so it's not as strong of, we got you doing work. You're pretty sure you're doing some work, but it's not the same type of thing. And so one of the things we may want to do, Christina, is continue to work with the city officials, just like we do with our investigators and our own staff inspectors, to gather the information we need to make the case, as opposed to I saw them on the site. I saw them on the site pulling wire, installing X, as opposed to we walked out there and they were there. That's a different level, and that's a different level of proof. The more specificity in the activities that they have witnessed them engaging in versus their presence where those activities are happening. There's a difference, and I don't know if that makes sense, but it's got to be, we got to catch you to have it stronger, or else it's, no, I was just walking through. I just happened to have a belt with wire and these things on. But that's not as strong as having somebody give us a contract to do work. So there are different degrees, and I just don't want you to think just because someone says it, we can always prove it up. Sometimes we need to help the building officials know how to characterize and state their violations so that it can be firmer. And we'll work on that.
Okay, thank you, Brian.
Any other questions?
Yes, John Sparrow. I think it's important to realize that a lot of the cities and municipalities have different ordinances and amendments to the code and to the rules that don't, apply to what the department is enforcing. Some of them require, no use of subcontractors and things like that, which, they have to actually enforce themselves. So I think sometimes it's difficult for the cities and municipalities throughout Texas because they do change significantly, and I guess as Chairman Bell said earlier, you sometimes operate on different codes. So it's very difficult for an overall enforcement from a state level to push down through the municipalities when they're so different. I do have one other thing. On the quality of work, and I think it's number 6, it says on the Class C, it says performed electrical work that did not comply with all the applicable codes and ordinances. Obviously, if an electrician goes out and performs work and then fails an inspection, which, the inspection's there to find items that are not code compliant, he essentially would be, or he or she would essentially be under, this section for not complying. I think that should probably say intentionally performed electrical work.
The requirement of proving intent is not in the law. Remember, we're not creating law here. We're simply lifting violations out of the rules, and that particular violation is in the rules in section 7353. It doesn't call for intentional
Okay,
to be proved.
so if an electrician performs his work with the intent of code but gets something wrong, he's still liable for...
He's still subject to the rule, but
Okay.
in reviewing the investigation of that case, that might be a good example of where that discretion would come in that we were talking about earlier. Depending on how serious the violation is, depending on what the electrician did to fix it, after it was brought to his attention by an inspector or by our staff. All those factors would come into play in determining if we penalize him or not.
Okay.
So that, Mr. Chairman Bell, Mark Roach, that would clearly be a case where electrical work was performed outside any municipal jurisdiction.
No, not necessarily. It could
How-
still be within a municipality.
Okay, I guess that's where I'm a little bit confused. Getting back up into the first 2 points under that, where a municipality, within a municipality versus within an unincorporated area. Of all the cases that you deal with, are you getting that large a number of cases coming to you referred by electrical inspectors from municipalities?
I don't really know how many are being referred by them, but yes, we do get them. And for unlicensed activity as well as sometimes for violations of code.
Just trying to understand, is it because they don't feel like they can resolve the matter within their own framework?
I don't know why they refer cases to us, but we do have, the city officials have jurisdiction through their city ordinances to take enforcement action at the city level. It's typically maybe a Class C misdemeanor type criminal violation. We have independent jurisdiction to pursue enforcement action under the statute and the rules to seek administrative enforcement action. The one doesn't supersede the other.
And I understand that. I'm just a little bit confused. Maybe, Brian, you could shed some light, or Jerry. Electrician within a municipality's got to go in and get a building permit. He has to get a permit to perform the work.
Right.
He's in some sort of contradiction with electrical licensing law. If the municipality, if the code enforcement department of the municipality finds fault, the building permit or the electrical permit gets pulled and all construction stops. That's huge. Versus an inspector calling y'all and you come in and slap somebody's hand, but the work keeps going on. I mean, I'm a little bit confused how the two overlap successfully.
Well,
Mr. Rhodes.
the answer is, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Let me just comment, Keith Bell. For instance, there's plenty of contractors that don't pull permits in municipalities. So if a contractor goes out, does work without a permit, and then the inspector catches that work, then calls the contractor, and the contractor refuses to fix it, then the only other than the criminal penalty, if maybe there is one, or revocation of license in the municipality, the chief electrical inspector is gonna want more blood than just taking somebody's local license. They're gonna call the TDLR and say, hey, I want that guy's license revoked because he's working in my town without pulling permits, refused to fix it. But to your point about pulling permits, absolutely. If you get a red tag, and all of us get them every day, the authority having jurisdiction, and the code definitions in Article 100 makes that clear, the authority having jurisdiction decides how to apply the code. And so, it's different in every community depending on who the chief is, and we have to fix it because they gotta be happy. You're exactly right. But I think what you're talking about, this is referring to in the event someone did not pull a permit but is licensed, or maybe, and they refused to.
That was my point, Mr. Chairman, to bring out the fact that under these two rules here, there is a large degree of unpermitted work that goes on. Just because work takes place in a municipality is not under the assumption that it's permitted work, and that the inspector would have an avenue of relief on his own, and then,
Right.
and not getting lazy or whatever, just inundates the department with, okay.
And just to, Mr. Chairman, if I may, just to add to it, Mr. Chairman hit it right on the nose, is that even when the electrical program was first brought to the agency, you had a situation where you had the 42 city licenses in your pocket, and you screwed up in one city. Well, you still got to go do work in 41. This is the ability to take away your ability to do work in any of them. And there are inspectors who are like, this is a bad actor, repeated over and over, and now I'm going to elevate it to the level of, you're not just going to skip to the 5 cities around my area. We're going to take responsibility or try to address that on a statewide basis, and I think that's the power of the state license when Kaiser and those folks are able to revoke one. One more thing, if I may add, on Mr. Palmical, online, we have the online complaint process, and we've recognized that there is a difference between the quality of information you need for an unlicensed case and just a regular complaint. So we actually have 2 different paths for all of our programs. And so if you go on there and you click on the air conditioning one, it says, hey, to help us make the best case for unlicensed activity for air conditioning, here's what we need from you, here's the information, and here's some documentation that will help us. And we have the same thing for a towing unlicensed case and a licensed breeder one, the specific documents that may help us make that case. Because we do recognize that they're not all created equal, but the more we can pinpoint they did that activity and here are the documents or the pictures or the contracts they demonstrated, it really allows us to get at it tighter. So just something to think about.
Great. All right, any other questions concerning the penalty matrix? As Ms. Kaiser has requested, under Class D, 3rd bullet, she would like to add, or attempted to obtain after obtained and before the A, correct?
Yes, sir.
So that will be the recommendation from the department. Are there any revisions to that by this board to consider? If there's not, then based on that amendment, the chair would accept a motion to recommend this amended matrix to the commission for approval.
Mr. Chairman, Mark Roach, so moved.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Roach. Is there a second?
It's Gary Strauss, second.
Second by Mr. Strauss. Have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, call for the vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Ms. Kaiser, I want to commend you and your staff for going through this. I believe we have moved this around to be commensurate with, the fine. The punishment's going to meet the crime, so to speak. And we appreciate what you guys are trying to do and protect our license and our industry, and mostly to protect the consumer and the constituents of Texas and their assets. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Board
Mr. Chairman, I
members.
apologize. I was talking in Tamla's ear as the motion and the second was done. Could we get the names of the persons so that we can?
Yes, it's Mr. Roach made the motion and Mr. Strong made the second.
Thank y'all very much.
Strauss, I'm
Strauss,
sorry.
yes.
Can't read my own writing. And it was 7-0.
Sorry about that.
8-0. 8-0, excuse me.
See,
Thank
you're
you,
still
board
worried
members.
about
That
driving
changed
85
too.
down here. Mr.
Exactly.
Chairman.
Your writing and math are
I'm
questionable.
gonna end up.
You had to
on-
bring that up,
I'm
Randy.
gonna end up on YouTube, Mr. Roach, after all. That's my only fear, being the chair, is somehow I don't end up on YouTube by noon on the day of a meeting.
Well, don't feel bad, Mr. Chairman. If I could have gotten away with it, I would have, but I was in a parking lot, so I
I
couldn't go.
understand. Moving on to item I, recommendations for agenda items for the next meeting. Obviously, staff reports, any other burning issues at this point?
Mr. Chairman, Mark Roach, I've got one, some questions that have come to me from the public regarding the use of overtime hours in satisfying the 2,000-hour requirement within any given year.
Okay, we can certainly put that on the agenda. I think at the end of the day, that's a statute issue, and probably the department could send us all a report concerning.
We can, but
that.
I think there are opportunities
And
for
we
the advisory board to look at it from a
And
rules
discuss.
perspective.
Right. Come up with some, I think we need to look at it and either, agree to keep it as it is or possibly recommend
It's been a long time since we've had
pursuance
the
of changes.
conversation.
Right, yeah,
Yeah.
discussion.
Mr. Chairman, also reciprocity updates, if we have any of those.
Any other issues that you'd like to put on the agenda for our subsequent meeting? I'm sure there may very well be some other things that come up, so any others will be to be determined. Moving on to item J, discussion of date, time, and location of next meeting. I would assume that's to be determined, and
Yes,
it
sir.
will still be in Austin, Texas.
It'll still be here, and we're looking at trying to dovetail it with some of our strategic planning activities, so we can maximize the level of attendance, but also the information that we gather from the
Well, I just, last item is adjournment under K. I'd just like to commend everyone for being here. I think this is the closest we've had to a full advisory board in several years. So thanks for taking the time to be here. Appreciate that. It is 10:32 a.m., excuse me, and we stand adjourned. Thank you.